Hello everyone, in this section we're going to look at how we can start using our authentication inside of React Native and start communicating with our REST API. So in the previous section we built a authentication with JWT tokens so that we could log into the database with credentials and we could get a nice JSON web token back that we can use to authenticate ourselves and use the rest of our REST API. And we also built a sign up so we can sign up a new user. And now we're actually going to use this REST API inside of our React Native app. So that's what we are going to create this form here. We're going to create this form, the layout, and also the big mechanics to be able to sign in. So if you click sign in, you will get a JSON web token back from our REST API, which we then can use on in later sections to authenticate ourselves and use the rest of our REST API. And also it's going to display some errors if the user doesn't exist or the email doesn't exist or if the password is wrong. And it's also going to be able to say if an account with the email already exists. And basically it's made such that you can either sign in or create an account. And well, if you just create a new email and have a password here and you create the account, then it's just going to create the account. So if we say create account, now it's automatically created the account and it also signed in afterwards and has been giving us our token. So that's a really simplified way of creating accounts and logging in at the same time. But you can always build onto this if you want to, but it's a really good and nice example for you guys. I hope you will enjoy it and I'll see you in the next section. So if you start out with the last section we were at last time, you have the branch with 10 error handling and JWT authentication. So if you've just been following the course so far, we have this login and sign up we just did in the last section where we could get the JWT token. And now we're going to build this form screen where we can log in and use our REST API. So right now we still have this passenger and driver menu selection in the app, but now we're going to build a login screen instead. So let's just add a new screen in here. Let's call it login. Let's create a new file, call it login. And then we're going to make a React Native component in here. So let's go ahead and do that. If you don't know this extension already, I really recommend that you check out this extension inside of Visual Studio Code. Search for React. And this really popular extension where you have snippets you can create really fast, where you can create a React Native component or just React components really fast. It has lots of examples in here. And now we're going to use the one for RNCS, which is a React Native component with style sheet. So that means instead of having to type out the import React component and so on inside, you can just type React Native component with style sheet and you're going to get all of this. So that's just a little quick tip for you guys, so you don't have to type up a lot of things of the same things, which I don't like to. And now we're going to save this file. And then instead of returning our app.js file, this one, which is this menu for selecting between passenger and driver, we're just going to say we return the login instead. So let's say login here, and then let's import login from, let's see, screens login. So now I see some text component up here. And I'm also going to reload this one. And it says text in component up there. So that's our login component we just made. And now we're going to style it up and create some forms inside of it. So first of all, let's create a container here. So we say style, styles container. And then let's create a container style here. Let's give it a flex of 1 and let's put in a background color. And I'm going to use this color in here. This one, which is a dark color. And then, well, we need to have a sort of header text. So we have a header text here. Let's call it a style with styles header text. And then let's put in our name of the app. You can call it whatever you want. I will call mine React Native Taxi. And then we need to somehow style this header text. So we go inside of header text style. Give it a font size of 44. And let's make it a white color. Or more like a green color actually. This one, I will just enlarge the text a bit so you can see more. Like that. And then let's also give a margin. And then let's align it on the middle. So text align, center. There we go. Now one more thing, a little gotcha I'm going to show you. If you set the font weight here, let me just remove this. And if you set this font weight here, let's say we set it to 200 to make it a nice crisp thin font. You can see it changes inside of the iPhone simulator here in iOS, but it doesn't really affect the Android simulator. And there's a little trick to that. We need to import the platform component from React Native. And then we need to change the font family on the Android. So if the platform OS is Android, then we're going to change to the font that is called Sans Serif Light. And if it's not, then we just say undefined. That's okay. So now you can see the font suddenly got a little thinner on the Android version of the app. So Android doesn't really support this font weight at this size, at least. Maybe 800 is, yeah, that seems to be supported. But anything lower like 200, 100 doesn't seem to work the same inside of Android as iOS. So a little gotcha there. You need to remember to set the font to be sans serif light on Android. All right, so that is our header text. Now what we need to do is we need to add maybe some forms. So let's go ahead now and start building on the form for the email and the password itself. So I'm going to make a new component inside of the components folder we have up here. I'm going to make a new file and call it loginform.js. And again, if you can remember the shorthand form for writing a React Native component with styles, so React Native component with styles. And there we go. Now we have a whole component for us. So let's go ahead and import it inside of the login screen. Import login form from, and I think we need to go up one directory and into components and then login form. And now we need to start using it. So we say login form. And there we have our text in component. And now let's try and see, we need a text input definitely to take in the input from the user. And that seems to be it, I think. So let's make our first text input. Also, we need to have some buttons, but let's do that later. And so we have a text input. And let's put a style on it. So we say styles input. Let's have the input down here for the style. And let's give it a height, so we at least see some of the input. It's just kind of, I think it's invisible right now. So if we do a background color of white, then we see lots of white, well, where the text input is. And let's give it a background color like this. That's what I'm going to use, this color code. Just like that, a little less white. And then give the color, so the color of the font inside it, to be white. So now that we write inside it, it is a white text here. And let's reload it. And now let's set also a padding of 10. So there's a little padding on the text when you write. So it's not just at the edge, it's a little with a little padding here. And okay, let's add another one of these text styles, see how it looks. So now they're just right on top of each other. Let's give it a margin bottom of 10. So now they are not that close again. And now let's put in a placeholder text on these two inputs. So we have something so the user can see, okay, this is the type of input you are expecting here. So for example, your email.com on the top. And you can see it's really grayed out because you actually need to set the color of the placeholder text inside of this properties, inside the properties of this component. And it's called placeholder text color. And here you can set it to be white, just like the other font we set to white down here in color. So now both the placeholder text is white and the text that we type is white thanks to the color style we have here. Now let's go and copy that and put it inside this component. And now we just write a password instead. And then we also need to make sure that auto capitalize is set to none, so we don't have any capitalization. And autocorrect should also be set to false on this password, so we don't start autocorrecting people's password. And let's also set this to be a secure text entry, so that when people type in, they don't show whatever people type in. And if it's not showing, well, if it doesn't have the secure text entry, it's going to show the password to everyone. That's not so nice. Let's see. What else do we need to do? I think we can also set a keyboard type here to be a keyboard type of email address. Just like that. And I think we also need to set auto capitalize to none on the email and also set autocorrect to false on email. So that is it, folks. Now we also need some buttons, Okay. So to do that, let's import touchable opacity like that. Actually, don't use text in this one. I'm not sure if we're going to use it. Let's see. So we import some touchable opacity. Let's use them down here. And let's have a text component saying sign in, for example. Sign in. And then let's have one also to create an account. Actually, I'm going to leave that for now because they're going to be so similar, these two buttons. So we just copy and paste one of them when we're done. Anyway, when we need to set a style for this button. So let's say styles. button. And let's see, what do we need to do with this button? The button. Let's see. We need to set a background color. We use this background color here. It's a very nice Android green or whatever you want to call it. And let's also put some padding on the top and bottom using padding vertical. So that's going to be 20 points of padding on the top and the bottom as well. And we also need to style this button text in here. So let's say styles button text. And let's add the button text down here. And we need to have, well, first of all, we need to center it. So we say text align center. That's going to center it. And we also need, I think we need to make it a little bigger, maybe. Font size 23. Like that. And let's, and now you can see it's a little grayed out here on the Android version. But if you set the color to be, I mean, if you definitely set the color to be black, then Android is gonna figure it out like, oh, you want this text to be black. Okay. I didn't know the text needed to be black. But iOS figured it out already. That's how it is. Sometimes there's little differences in these platforms and you need to take care of that. Again, same thing. We see the differences between the platforms when we set the font weight to 200, like we did before. And you see it gets thin, nice and crisp, like we had with the header in the iOS version. But Android, nah, they couldn't really, they didn't figure it out. So you need to import platform again. And then we need to say font family. If the platform OS is Android, then we use the font family sans serif light. And if it's not Android, we just say undefined. Just like that. And now the font got a little thinner here. It's much nicer. And now, people, this is where we just do a good old copy paste. Because now, if we change the font in here, or to change the text in here, we suddenly have a create account button. I mean, of course, if you add some margin to it, if not, people is gonna think it's just one big button, right? So let's add some margin vertical. If I can spell it right, margin vertical, let's add 10. And now there's a little spacing between the buttons thanks to the margin. Yeah, I think that is it for now. Now we just created the login. Now let's see, what else do we need to do? No, not so much else, I think. We also need to establish a state, and I'm going to establish the state of the password and email and handling this login, logout inside of this parent component containing the login form here. And probably at some point, we're also going to transfer this state of the token we're getting back into another parent component, but that's going to be a later episode for now. For now, all you need to do is create a constructor with a props, pass the props onto the parent component, and let's create a state with an email that's blank and a password that's blank, and also an error message that's blank. That is it for now. And now let's pass this email onto the login form. So this state, email, and a password, let's also pass that from the parent component state. This state password, and boom, the evaluating null is not an object. Let's see, what did I do wrong here? I just needed to reload. That is all. And now, well, if you try and change this, okay, actually it's, okay. That's because we haven't set a value property inside of these text inputs. That's why I was wondering, why could I change this text? Because, well, you will see. So if we say value is this props.email here on the email text input, and we say value is equal to this props.password. So this is the properties we pass from the parent component. And let's see if we do. So now I'm getting what I expected here, because when I try to type things, nothing happens because the value has been set to be from the properties email, or the parent component's email property, which is just blank. But we need to pass in a handle change function as well. So on change text, so that's what happens, what is being called when we change the text inside of this text input. So here we have, for example, the email, and we could say this a props handle change, and we pass in email and the value, so email. So this handle change we're going to define inside of our parent component inside login, just like this. Handle change, and here we have a name of the state or the property we're changing and a value. So now we can say this set state, and we pass in the name and the value. So this means that we can pass in any name for a different property in the state we want to change, like email. And then it's going to change the email state with this value. And the value is the one we have here. So now when I start typing in, it's going to fail. Because I need to make one more thing, which is to add a binding inside of the constructor of the parent component. So now it's saying this props.handle change is not a function. Well, actually it's saying that because I need to pass in the handle change function. So handle change, say this handle change. So now we pass it in, and now if I try to do this again, it's going to fail again. And if you are good enough to know why, then props to you. So if we say, if I start typing now, it's going to fail again, because it's saying this.setState is not a function. So before now, it failed because we didn't pass the handle change function. So now it complained about, hey, what is this handle change function? I couldn't find it. Now we got the handle change function in here, but now it says this.setState is not a function. So now it's saying that this.setState is not a function in handle change. Well, the reason why is because we need to bind this. So basically, anytime you want to use this inside of a function that you're also passing into another component, you need to bind it. Well, yeah, bind it basically. So this handle change, this.handle change .bind this. So that's how you bind this inside of a function, and basically make sure that you can call this. So anytime you see something where this is not defined, this.setState is not defined, when you are doing your work with the functions, just remember you need to bind it to be able to use this. Now let's see if finally we can start typing in our email. And well, that's all good and fine, but we also want a password, right? So now let's do the same thing for the password. And I promise you it's going to be a lot easier, because now we already made lots of the groundwork here. So let's just copy the unchanged text to this one in the password section. And let's just change this to password. And I'm going to change this to PV. I mean, it could also just be any other name. I just like to have this email and password for clarification. Let's see people now. Everything should be good and working. I hope so. And we can see we can type in lots of text here. Now we need one more thing. We need to be able to sign in and create an account, of course. And to do that, we need to be able to talk with our API. And that's what we're going to do in the next section now. Now we need a way so we can actually communicate with our REST API and start signing in and creating new user accounts. So first, make sure that you have the REST API running. Go into the Express backend folder and run Node1 index.js. And now you got that running. Let's go and check out how our request looked inside of Postman. So inside Postman, we had the login endpoint where we have a body containing an email and a password. So if I go and say send post on login, I get a token back. And we also have a sign in or sign up where we can sign up with an email and a password. If it already exists, well, we get this error. If there's a new one, we create a new email with a new password, then it's going to say user validation failed because we need a first name and last name. But otherwise than that, it's going to return the object of the user we created. And then you can use login again to login. So pretty simple, fairly simple, but now we need to use it inside of our React Native app. So we need to import or use a new package which is called Axios. So let's go inside the mobile folder. Let's say yarn add Axios. We could also use the fetch API, but I think Axios is a lot easier to use, especially for post request. So with that, let's import Axios up here. Import Axios from Axios. And one more thing we need to do is we need to set the default base URL on Axios. What I mean by that is we have this IP of our backend that we are running the backend on, which is the computer's local IP. In this case, for me, it is 192.168.0.27. Now we need to set this base URL to be that IP or wherever we are running the backend on. So we say Axios defaults base URL, and we say HTTP / and then goes in the IP wherever you're running the backend on, and the port, in my case, it's 4000. And that's it. So now every request we send to Axios is going to be on this IP and port. And that's going to come in handy if you ever want to deploy your backend somewhere else than where it is now, and you need to change your IP or domain, and you don't have to go through all of the different places that you use the Axios API and change the IP. Actually, I'm going to make another file here in the base folder of mobile. Go ahead, make a new file, and I call it base URL. And in here, let's make the base URL string again. So let's say base URL, HTTP 192.168.0.27. That's for me. So for you, it's probably going to be different. So make sure it fits for your IP where you are running the backend. And now let's just import that base URL instead. So we say import base URL from one directory up and go into base URL. And then let's just use this base URL instead. Now this means that we can just change this base URL if your IP ever changes for the backend. And yeah, so now let's try and actually get some requests going on. We need to make a handle sign in function, which is going to handle when we press the sign in button. So let's say handle sign in. And then let's make a try catch clause in case we get any errors. We need to handle those errors and display an error message to the user. Let's just do a console error for now. And let's make a Axios request inside here. So we say Axios post. Don't I have Axios up here? There's some weird console import. Mine does when I do use console for some reason. I will just delete that. So Axios.post, and then we have the URL. So this is going to be the endpoint URL, which is auth login. And then we have the data, which is going to be the state, the email and password. And then we have a result, and that's going to be containing our JSON Web Token. And now let's just use some destructuring to get the email and password from the state. So this.state, we get the email and password properties, and we can use them in here in the post request. Also, I would like to make this async, and I also like to put a wait in front of this. Now let's see, people, let's see. And one more thing I think I like to do is to import alert. And then let's just do a message box showing the JSON Web Token. So we say alert.alert, no title, and the message is going to be result data dot what is it? Let's see. The token. Okay. So that's just going to display this token string as an alert message box if our login is successful. So now let's see, we need to pass this handle sign in function onto the login form. So let's pass on handle sign in as this dot handle sign in. And we also need to remember to bind this function, because we're going to use this inside the function, and we pass it onto another component. So let's say this handle sign in, this handle sign in dot bind this. And now let's see, we'll go inside the login form, and now we need to call this sign in function when we press this button. So on press, we just say this.props.handle sign in, just like that. And now I think there's going to be a red console log.error because our login is wrong. And we see undefined is not an object. Evaluating this.state email, that is a bit strange because I did do a binding of this. Let me try and reload it. And okay, so now it's coming up with the request failed with status code 4.1. And 4.1 means not authorized. But let's display a little nicer error message than this. Instead, we're going to say this.setState and say error message is equal to, let's see, error.response.message. I think that is it. Actually, it's response.data. It's a little different when it's an error from Axios compared to when it's a successful response where you just can go say .data and get the data itself. Here you have to first say error.response.data because the error object is containing a lot of other data besides just the server response. But we just want to display the server response so that it says, let's reload this again. Oh, I still have this console log.error, so that's why it's still making this big red box. So, but we're not displaying this error message yet. So let's go ahead and do that. I'll put it down below the login form here. And let's see. So let's have this text styles error message. And let's put in the state of this error message. Remember, in the beginning, we don't have any error message at all. But now it came up with this email does not exist in the bottom. Now let's style up our error message a bit so it can be read easier. And let's set a margin here to margin horizontal so it's not at the edge to be 10. And let's set the font size to 18. Let's also set a color here. It's like a little red tinted color, but mostly white, as you can see. And then let's set the font weight to be bold. There we go. Now let's see how it looks in the Android version. It is kind of odd that it's not, maybe it's because I don't have live reload on. Anyway, it says now this email does not exist on both Android and iOS. Now let's see. Create account doesn't work yet, but let's see. Let's try and see if sign in now actually works, if it's going to display this alert message box if you put in a correct login. So remember, I have my login already. If you don't have it, just create a new login in the Express API and use the one you already created. In this case, I have this one here. And I'm just going to copy it into the state here because I don't want to type on the keyboard we have here, the virtual keyboard. So I just type it in, or copy paste it into the state here. Whoops, that was, I don't know. That was not what I wanted to copy. There we go. So now I already have the credentials inside. And there we go. So now when I click on sign in, it gets me the token. And this token we're going to use in later sections where we're going to use different parts of the API we built so that only authenticated users can use the API. And let's just check for good measure if it also works inside of Android. And it looks like it also works inside of Android. Now what's left to do is to make one for handle sign up as well, which is going to be a lot similar to this one. Now it's time to make the handle create account instead. So we say, or handle sign up. So we say async handle sign up. And just like we had a try catch in the sign in, we also have one here. And we catch any errors. And we also just set the state of this error message. And now we go ahead again and use the email and password from the state. And the only difference here is that we are going to use a different endpoint. We're going to use the sign up endpoint instead. Just like that. And after that, we just do this dot handle sign in. So if someone successfully signed up, then we just go on to handle sign in. If not, then we display an error message. And yeah, that's it. Now let's pass on this handle sign up function onto the login form. So handle sign up, this dot handle sign up. And let's see, we have the create account button here. So we pass on press, we pass on the handle sign in here, this dot props, handle sign up. And there we go. So people, now let's try and make an account. I'll just enter in a random email, random password, doesn't matter. And I say create account. And it seems like it failed. No. Let's see what kind of error we got here. So what happens actually right now is that what I think is happening right now. Let's see. What I think is happening. Undefined is not an object. I think that the error message we have on create account is not correct. Let's see. Let's do a console log or console error on the error. Wow, our bundler just... Oh, and I also did that import console log up here again. I don't know why I think it's... I don't know who's doing that. Who's the bad extension in Visual Studio Code doing that? Let's see. Oh yeah, I need to bind the function because yeah, I'm not quite sure. Let's see if that does it. I need to bind the function here, of course. But you probably already knew that when you were watching it. You were thinking, what is he doing? He's not binding the function. And now it says request failed with status code 409, which means that the email is already existing. And of course, we want a little nicer error than that. So let's go ahead, say create account, but nothing happens. And I think I know why, and that is because if the email is already existing, our error looks like this. It just is a string. We don't have the property with a data.message on it. So we need to change a little bit in our backend now. So make sure that you have NodeMon running, or else you need to start up the backend again if you change it. So go inside the Express backend and go inside of auth. And then we have a create user. Now you can see this create user function right here. You can see that we are not throwing an error like we do at the login function. So it's the error message is looking a bit different. It's just coming out as a string instead of a message object. So we just need to do that. So we say const error, new error. And we say an account. It's just the same text. This email already exists. And we set the error status code to be 409, which is like for already existing, I think, already existing resource or something like that. Then we throw the error, so it's going to be the same kind of error we get as all the other errors. So now we have a nice little message here with an account already exists. And I also need to make sure this is status code, not just status, or else it's going to just be 500. Even though it doesn't really matter that much, it is still nice. So with that being said, let's go and try to sign up or create a new account. And voila. So now, because we made sure that we now always have this .message property even on this kind of error where the email already exists, it can now display the error message down here. Now let's try and make an email that I know is not unique and that I know is unique. And now it says user validation failed. First name, last name is required. So I thought about this and I thought, okay, I could make a new screen just to put in the first name, last name. But I thought, you know what? It's okay. It doesn't matter. If you want to do that, go ahead. You can do it. But we're going to do a little workaround here, folks. Okay. We're just going to go ahead inside of the backend again, Express backend, and go inside the model and the user model. And we're going to do a little required. We set to false, and the required here we set to false. Maybe later we really want to use the first name and last name, but for now, let's just keep it as email and password. So now, let's see. One more thing we need to do. One more thing. When we do the handle sign in, let's also clear the set state of this error message. So if someone had an error and they sign in again, at least the error message will be cleared now. So, and when we type in create account again, it's going to create the account now, do the handle sign up where we create the account, and then do handle sign in, where it's going to display an alert in the end with the token, which means that now the user has logged in and created an account. So there you go, people. It's a quite weird email because we don't have any email validation in it. You can also put that in if you want to, but for now, for testing purposes, I've just had this no validation enabled. And then we can sign in and you get a new token every time. And of course, the idea is that this token we're going to stay in the app storage or in the state of the app, and then you can use it later on to authenticate yourself. So that is it, people. One more thing, right? We need that car down in the bottom, right? We need that car. So in order to get that car, go ahead inside of my GitHub, inside of the branch. Go ahead inside of the taxi app repository and go and look in the branch 11, creating login form. Go inside mobile, then go inside the images folder. And here's a greencar.png. There's a nice green car. Let's go ahead, download it. And say save image as, and then we just save this green car inside of our mobile folder, inside the images folder, and then we save it. Now we got this green car inside of our folder, images folder. One more thing we probably need to do is to restart our bundler because we added this new asset. So go ahead, restart the bundler. Now the bundler is restarted and we can start using this glorious picture of a green car we have. So let's go ahead inside the login screen and import image. I already imported image here. Go ahead and go and do that. And then we say image source acquire, and then we pass in the folder or the path to the image. And then we also have a style for this image. Let's call it the styles logo. And Then let's go down here at logo and say height 300, width 300. And there we go. There's a nice big green car. And let's say align self, center. Now it's centered. And there we go. Now we have a nice big green car. That's it, folks. That's it for this section. Now in the next sections, we're going to look at actually communicating more with our REST API after we got this JSON Web Token after we sign in. Okay, see you in the next section, folks.